Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. Ever since the clock expired at the end of the Military Bowl and a blowout win over Tulane for Virginia Tech, there's been a hype and a buzz around this football program that hasn't been around in Blacksburg in what feels like quite some time. Well, now football season is upon us. An ACC Media Day down in Charlotte just took place. Our entire football crew was there and ready to unpack it all. It's episode 364 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. We record on Thursday, July 25th, 2024 from our high-tech studio at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Remember to like, subscribe, and refer the show to a friend, and head over to techsideline.com to check out our extensive editorial content. As always, the first month of your subscription is free. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, but this episode is also presented by the Master of Agricultural and Applied Economics degree at Virginia Tech. The Department of Agricultural and Applied Economics at Virginia Tech is a premier world-class department ranked globally in the top 10%. Visit online-ms.aaec.vt.edu today to learn how you can accelerate your career with our 100% online Master of Agricultural and Applied Economics degree. All right. ACC Media Day was just a couple of days ago. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. To the right is Chris Coleman, our lead analyst and columnist. Across the way, as always, Andy Bitter, our senior staff writer. And in the fourth chair, the managing editor, David Cunningham, the mustache man in a full-time position now behind the scenes, Nick Brown. Gentlemen, good to be back. Football season is back. Feels good to be up here with you.
Yeah, I think the ACC football kickoff is the sign every year that football season's right around the corner, and it's actually a little bit quicker around the corner this year because Tech starts practice on July 31st because the season starts in August, and some teams have already started practice. Those teams that have the week 0 games. Was it Florida State and
Florida State, SMU, Georgia Tech? Yeah, that's why they all went on Monday of the kickoff because they've already started practice.
Yep. So here we are. It's we can officially call it the preseason, I would say.
How was the Tech Sideline frat house? I heard you guys went and got an Airbnb and had a good weekend down there.
It was pretty good. I mean, the big news was that I beat Nick in a college football video game, first time playing. So, and I think the teams were even. It was neutral field, wasn't it? Whatever it was, I won the game. That's all that matters.
It was
still got it.
It was Tennessee. Andy was Tennessee. Nick was TCU, and they're playing in Neyland. So
okay,
those were.
Come on, though. I was up 21 at one point. It was a butt kicking.
Andy started hot. Nick and I split when we played. It was a good time. It's always nice to get down, see fellow media members. It's a bummer. A little bit of a bummer because they spread it out to 4 days now. So like there are people that I know I'm friends with that cover like some of the Carolina schools that just got there today,
right?
As we record on Thursday, and we didn't even get a chance to see them. We didn't even overlap by a day. So, but it's good, and obviously there's a lot of hype around Virginia Tech.
In contrast to that, basketball, they do all the men's in one day, all the women's in another day.
It's
and
nice.
Instead, football, they split it up like crazy. Chris, did you get on the sticks and play it? Have you played the new game at all?
I've watched them play it.
Okay.
You can't play defense in the game.
Sure, it was built for the big play. That is a big knock on the game.
Who's playing a video game so you can have like a defensive battle? Like
Chris Coleman.
Like, lots of punts.
So Nick is playing
like Kirk Ferentz over here.
This is going to be a quick story. Nick's playing Georgia online, playing as Virginia Tech against Georgia, and Nick wins the game. And like right before halftime, I'm like, you need to run the clock, right? Because Georgia has more talent. Make it fewer plays. Don't let them get the ball back before halftime. I use strategies like that in those games.
Sure.
He won, by the way. He beat Georgia.
There you go.
They didn't get the ball back before halftime. He got that extra, was it a field goal or a touchdown? Extra field goal, and that was the difference.
And down go the dogs. There you go. Nick's pretty good on the game, from what I've heard. I have yet to, but we're gonna have to hop on and play.
If he's
Nick.
pretty good, what does that say about the guy who beat him?
Well, that means that you're the GOAT.
We're all waiting to see you bring in a Genesis and play NHL 94.
Yeah, I told Nick that I would put a beating on him that his children would feel in NHL 94.
I've got a Sega.
I was so good at that game. Like I'd give me like 20 minutes to get back in the flow of it, and I'll dominate anybody at that game.
I'm pretty sure they remade NHL 94, and now you can download it on like Xboxes and stuff. So you can probably get NHL 94 on your PlayStation, I believe. You'll have to look into it.
Fire it up.
There you go.
I don't want that smoke at all.
David, how has your performance in the game gone as of late?
It's going all right. I played a lot when it first came out and was like not around my console, so I hadn't played. I played a little bit with Nick. I got back into it last night.
There you go.
First of all, you're burying the lead here. You beat Nick with like a walk-off 50-yard touchdown pass up the sideline after taking a safety to almost blow the game before that.
What team were you playing as?
I was Texas A&M. Nick was TCU. Yeah, we were playing in College Station, and walk-off wheel route for the win.
Wow, wheel route with the halfback.
As time expired. And then Nick and I played. I forget who we played with the second game. He beat me by a touchdown. So
that play always seems to be open in that game.
The wheel route?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've thrown a lot of picks on the wheel route.
Believe it or not, we did more than play video games on this trip.
Yeah,
we did a lot of
work.
Yes. All right. Let's dive into that here, shall we? Well, ACC Media Day was kicked off by ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips in a nearly hour-long speech and a Q&A segment about the ACC, the recent legal battle specifically involving Florida State, Clemson, the ACC's current but arguably outdated grant of rights contracts. What did you guys take away from what Phillips had to say up on the stage? Andy, I know you wrote an article on this.
Yeah, well, there's not a lot you can take away because all it is talk. Like what the actual stuff that's going on is in the courtroom right now, and that's going to decide the fate of the ACC and what options Florida State and Clemson might have going forward. And that's just getting started. That's going to be a long, protracted battle there. So whatever Jim Phillips says one way or another doesn't really have a whole lot of bearing on this whole thing. I think he pushed back a little bit. The Big 12 was pretty out there with his comments about we're the third best conference. It's like, I don't know about that. You and the ACC are about even. I don't know if you guys should be bragging about being number 3. But Jim Phillips made his case for the ACC. He was forceful with his language about Florida State and Clemson and the lawsuits being disruptive to the league. And I think the big takeaway I saw is it didn't sound like somebody who was ready to settle with those schools. I know, all these supposed insiders on Twitter that don't know anything. They're just throwing stuff up against the wall like, 6 teams are leaving the ACC for the Big 12. They're close to a negotiation. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think those sites know anything. I don't think they have any kind of insider information. I think this is going to be a long, protracted battle, like I said, in the courts. And this will be solved on a legal basis before that. But I don't think the ACC is sitting there like, we need an off-ramp here, and we've got to negotiate with Clemson and Florida State. I don't think they're to that stage yet.
Yeah, generally realignment news comes out of the blue.
Right. Yeah. The only one that was sort of leaked was when Texas A&M tried to stop Texas Oklahoma. Right. And they're like, let's put this out there and see if we can fury it up so people don't want it to happen.
It goes back to when Tech and Miami joined the ACC that year, and that process was very much in the public over the course of like 3 or 4 months. And after that, like commissioners learned their lessons and they do a much better job of keeping it in-house. It seems like every year when we go down to Charlotte for ACC football kickoff, there's some sort of realignment news. You get down there and then it's announced, Oklahoma's joining.
That was USC, UCLA. That was Oklahoma, Texas was during that media days time frame. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So nothing happened this year. I think there's a pause on it for a while. Let's have a couple of years with the 12-team playoff and how the conferences are now, see how that works, and then go from there, right?
Well, my whole thing has been I think these conferences have gotten so large that they're just going to be unwieldy.
Yep.
And they haven't even played a game. It's like a 17 or 18-team conference. And I think you're going to get into it and you're going to say, hey, this is not great. You're not playing half the league every year.
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to determine a champion with this stuff? So, Yeah, maybe get into it, see how it goes before you decide to further expand and make things beyond that. And like I said, I think the rumors are going to be on the reality of this whole thing. People want to get to 24-team conferences so quick. Well, what's the ACC? Is ESPN going to pick up the extension? I don't know the mechanics of that whole thing, but there's a look into the ACC contract. Will it be held up through 2036? Is there an exit ramp for Clemson and Florida State before that? We don't know any of this stuff. And if we don't know any of that stuff, those are the two programs, those in UNC, probably the top three programs in the ACC, the conferences that would be looking at. I think realignment's sort of on a pause until you get a resolution on that front, or until, Notre Dame decides to join a conference, which is not going to do.
Ever.
So, yeah.
Do you see a point in what Florida State and Clemson is saying in a way that this contract, the grant of rights, does feel a little outdated when you look at the financial significance? Because Jim Phillips' point was, well, everybody agreed to it. Everybody loved it when it happened, right? But now you see the SEC, even the Big 12 with their new contract, the Big 10 making quite simply more money than the ACC teams when it comes to what they're allotted and what everybody gets when it all plays out at the end.
Well, it's the length. I mean, when you re-up your contract and you do it every 5 or 6 years, like TV rights just keep going up.
Right.
That has not stopped yet. So if you get to renegotiate every 5 or 6 years, like these other conferences have been able to do, it's going to go up, 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 unless you screw it up like the Pac-12 did. But the ACC doesn't get that opportunity. So that's why it's going to be lagging behind the other ones. But the flip side is there is stability, and they haven't lost any programs. Can't say that about the Pac-12. Can't say that about the Big 12. As much as the Big 12 wants to, puff its chest out there and be like, oh, we're number 3. It's like, well, that's, we're stable. Nobody wants to leave us. Well, nobody can leave you. Nobody wants your teams. That's why you're stable right now. The two teams that people wanted left. And what's remaining is a bunch of schools that don't have the profiles that other conferences want to take. So it's a strange position, I think, with the Big 12 sort of, talking trash like it is about, oh, look at the ACC. Everybody wants to pick it apart. It's like, yeah, because it has teams that are actually attractive to other conferences.
If you took the 8 or 9 most high-profile teams in the ACC and combine them with the 8 or 9 most high-profile teams of the Big 12, I think you've got a good league. And get yourself away from the small private schools where nobody goes to games and they have a low ceiling for things like that. But that's where I wish it would go.
Well, wait until, FSU and Clemson and UNC or whoever, extricate themselves from the ACC and go to, people say, oh, the Big 10 SEC don't want them. They don't want them because they're held up by all this legal process right now. And of course, they're not going to come out and publicly say they want them. They don't want to, get hit with a lawsuit about trying to break up the ACC. But once they're free of those obligations, can go somewhere, I think you'll see that there is actual interest in these schools. Because, come on, you tell me the SEC or Big 10 don't want Florida State, like a perennial power like that. I don't believe that at that point. So at that point, I wonder if the Big 12 and the ACC would, kind of like the leftover conference. Let's just put it all together into one, 30-team mix or whatever. And, may the best teams rise to the top of that.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing is the same thing that people have been complaining about is the only thing that's holding the league together, as we've said. If the grant of rights did not exist, it would be like other conferences where the best teams leave. And other teams had grant of rights, but they just weren't, through 2036. The Pac-12, the Big 12, the SEC deals, the conferences where everybody was leaving, those deals ran up, so schools had the opportunity to leave. If that was the case in the ACC, you'd be seeing more realignment of teams leaving the ACC. At the same time, if the ACC had to renegotiate a TV contract right now, I don't know. Like, yes, it is a low value in terms of the money that they're getting, but I don't know that they do any better now. I mean, the quality of football hasn't been great as of late from the conference. It's getting better, I think. But when you have a league that's almost half private schools and schools that don't really have large fan bases or care about football, as opposed to the SEC with giant state schools, and same thing with the Big 10, it makes it a little bit more difficult to market. And that's just kind of the position the ACC's in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the ACC, in a way, kind of started digging its own grave as soon as it was formed. Like Wake Forest in the league, Duke in the league. I mean, as far as football goes, Duke is obviously a great basketball value, but like, if all these conferences broke up tomorrow and new conferences were formed and they had a draft of schools go through the ACC programs, how many would actually get taken in the draft?
2 to 5.
Well, it depends on how big the conferences are.
Sure.
And things like that. But I'm just saying that, like Boston College, Wake Forest, schools like that, they're not getting drafted.
Right, but in this eventual realignment that will take place, where this power brands will break away from everything else, Purdue and Northwestern,
right.
Indiana, schools like this are going to be left behind
right.
in the Big Ten too. So I think you can say that about a lot of conferences. Granted, there are more in the ACC, I think, just because the number of schools that are truly committed to football are not that great. But I think you get that with any conference.
Yeah, and I don't
Vanderbilt and at the bottom, Kentucky doesn't typically care a lot about football in the SEC.
They don't. I think ultimately we're talking about a divorce here. Like, there's no long-term future when two schools are suing the conference and vice versa. Like, that's not going to survive.
Especially when there's already, 2036 is like the end date right now. And will that get moved up?
Is it going to be a 2-year divorce process or a 12-year divorce process?
That's a great way to look at it. Well, last thing on this, before we move on here, how, if at all, does this affect Virginia Tech in this kind of upper middle tier of the Atlantic Coast Conference here?
I think it's just kind of sitting and waiting. They're not at the forefront of these lawsuits, and quite frankly, I don't think they want to be. If Clemson and Florida State find a way out, like, fine. I think Virginia Tech might have options depending on how big these conferences want to get down the line. But then, I also look at, Oregon and Washington took like a 50% share, if that, to get into the Big Ten. Is Virginia Tech going to command a bigger offer than that? I don't know. What does the SEC want? Do they want new territory, a new state to expand into? If they do, I always see Virginia as a team that people prioritize in a realignment for some reason, where they're doing these different scenarios that they're playing out. So I don't know. I don't think anybody quite knows exactly where Virginia Tech stands, and I think from a football brand perspective, it's up there. It's up there among, the best properties that the ACC has. But I know expansion is sometimes more than just that.
We've seen that as well, this hype, this buzz around this program, and that's what we're going to unpack right now. We've seen that it seems like the national narrative is, man, it'd be sweet to see Virginia Tech back. And it looks like we're kind of trending that way. So I bring you this, guys. With the expectations the highest that they've been, and arguably over a decade, the Hokies kind of seem to be playing it cool. Those are David's words in his article at ACC Media Day. I totally could have seen the salesman that Brent Pry is coming out and diving headfirst into the hype. Yeah, we're the flagship school. We saw him do it last year at ACC Media Day. We saw him, obviously, when you're a first-year head coach, you have to do that a little bit. But instead, he's done really quite the opposite. We got a clip that we want to play for you. He had this to say when sitting on the desk at the ACC Network.
Coach, the expectations for this year, they're high. Do you embrace those? Yeah, for us,
breaking news.
I'm just like, as a coach, do you embrace that? It's a good problem to have, but do you embrace that or do you ignore it? How do you handle that?
No, I don't embrace it, but we talk about it. I want them to get pats on the back. I want them to feel good about what people are saying, but they also, because there were some good accomplishments.
Yeah.
But they also need to understand in the same breath that has no bearing on the team that we'll be when we go to Nashville. Has no bearing on it. It's the same type of noise. It just sounds different when we were 1-3. It has no bearing on who we are as a team. Only in that team room do we know what we have to do and who we need to be and where we got to get better. The folks in that room, nobody else really knows. No disrespect, but nobody knows like we know in that room.
That's right.
All right, guys. I just love how Coach kind of talked about it's the same noise as when you're 1-3. It just sounds a little bit different. I thought that was such a powerful quote. How do you think that he has handled all of this?
I think it's interesting how you see coaches handle this. Like when he first gets here, you're just trying to get people to talk about you. So you put on your Virginia Tech jacket. You get a commitment while you're on stage. And I know Tech will swear that was an accident, but it doesn't really seem like it.
No, they won't. Pry even said that he planned it.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah. If you're going to plan something like that, take credit for it.
Well,
don't act like it was a happy accident.
He told a different story than one of his support staff members. That
Okay.
Just got better,
but,
guys.
But anyway, I think I don't know. You have to think about stuff like that as a coach, and he's right. The way he phrased it is like people were talking about Tech last year, but obviously in an entirely different way after a 1-3 start. Like you said, the noise is different. I think it's all about how the type of players you recruit. And this group of players, they're not used to success. Sometimes that could be a good thing. Sometimes that could be a bad thing. But I think it is a good thing that is a senior-laden team and seems to have pretty strong leadership. Drones. I spent most of my day around drones when I was down there, and I asked him a question about. I asked him about committing to Virginia Tech and how it was a leap of faith. Because he committed to a 3-8 team with a bad offense. And he said that's true, but he's like, when I committed to Baylor, they had won 2 games. He's like, I'm used to taking leaps of faith. I'm not scared of it. And then he said this actually reminds me of the team after his freshman year at Baylor. They brought everybody back, and then they went, I think they went 12-2 and got up to number 5 in the country that year. So he has experience in this exact situation, going from a bad team to a good team. Now, he was not in a position of authority, so to speak, at Baylor as the backup quarterback, but he's been there to see how coaches handle it, how the starting quarterback handles it. So, for now he's in a position of authority. People will listen to him. He doesn't have a lot to say sometimes, but people will listen to him. So I think just having a quarterback with that type of experience, a similar experience at his previous school, I think that helps.
I'll say this about Pry. He's had time to hone this message and this quote because he said it to us in February before spring ball started, I think, on the podcast. Here, he's basically that quote verbatim. I thought it was interesting because you say he tried not to make a lot of noise. He did say to David Hale, he didn't say this, David Hale at ESPN, during one of the ESPN sessions they do. He said they'd be disappointed if they didn't make the ACC championship game, which is more than he said in terms of expectations with us. So I think that's embracing it. There are some expectations around this program. I think disappointed not to make the ACC title game. I don't know if I go that far because I still wouldn't put them in that category yet. A dark horse to make it there, dark horse to win it possibly. But, I look at the top teams that I would pick in the ACC, and I still wouldn't have Virginia Tech quite there because there's some things I need to see them prove before I would think that. But just the tenor and tone of where this team is this year compared to where it was 2 years or even any time in the last decade, I guess, much better place, much better standing right now.
You got some, Chris?
Yeah, actually, I was going to go over a Drones quote. Now, Drones did a really good job of saying, we've got to block it all out and, focus on Vanderbilt, your generic stuff that you would expect anybody to say. But then he was asked, what he thought the team's ceiling was, and he said, I believe we can go to the playoffs and go to the national championship and try to go win. That's what anybody would say, but I really believe that with the roster we have coming back and with how our schedule lines up, we can go win the ACC, go to the playoffs, and shock some people. So, yeah, there's the whole generic take it one game at a time, but it's also your starting quarterback says we can do big things this year. And he said multiple times how our schedule lines up or with what the schedule's like, which is basically what everybody else is saying about this team. It's a favorable schedule.
A quarterback who quietly once made that kind of prediction before? Michael Vick.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, Nathan Waters, who was covering the team at the time, said that, Michael Vick said, I think we can win a national championship with this team. And nobody listened to it or thought anything of it.
Lee
at the
Corso
time.
did.
Yeah, Lee Corso did, but like,
And Tech did get one preseason first place vote by an AP writer from Michigan. Some random dude that nobody had ever heard of. Like the polls come out, Tech is 13th, and you see like the 1 in parentheses.
let's
next to
say
it
it wasn't
like,
the consensus that
Yeah,
Virginia
fair
Tech
enough.
was going to win in that, but Vic, whether it's just somebody saying something like that or just having supreme confidence in yourself, did say that back then. So I don't want to draw comparisons between Vic and drones. I'm sure some people will do that from what I just said there, but I just thought it was interesting.
Was there any form of a game plan, it felt like, an agenda to push in a way when they headed into this? Or were they like, we're just kind of going to play it cool and let the story tell itself in a way?
I definitely think there's always some sort of strategy when you go down there. But at the same time, when you've got 3 guys that you trust in front of the media, those 3 guys have done plenty of interviews at this point. I do think you go down there with a certain strategy of we all want to be on the same page with the type of stuff you say, but you also want to let them be individuals too.
Awesome. All right. Well, the national picture seems to be that Tech returns 84% of its starters. That's 18 to 22. That ranks 4th in the FBS and first amongst Power 4 conferences. Virginia Tech's equipped with an elite quarterback, a dangerous run game. The Hokies won 5 of their last 7 games, and they have like a top 5. I think ESPN ranked them the 2nd easiest schedule in the country heading into this season. So I ask you guys this. That's the national picture. That's the narrative. What are people not talking about with this team that we should be talking about?
What do people not talk
Positive
about?
or negative?
Positive or negative.
Beat a good team.
Right.
I mean, I keep saying this, and it's not a fault of theirs. They didn't have a ton on the schedule in the second half of the season last year. But you look at the best teams that they played last year. Florida State lost by 19, whatever the score was of that game. Louisville completely outclassed in that game, especially in the trenches. That was an ugly one, start to finish. NC State, I think NC State came in here and pushed them around quite a bit. And those are the 3 best teams in the ACC last year. Now they do get a schedule break; they don't play some of those teams. But who was their best win last year? I'm having a tough time. It might be BC. We say Tulane in the bowl game, but I kind of compare that to like.
No coach, no quarterback.
Right, like if Virginia Tech didn't have Brent Pry and didn't have Kyron Drones and Mansour and Dorian opted
the
out,
Maryland Bowl
right?
game.
It was basically what the Pinstripe Bowl was. No Virginia Tech fan is taking serious that result from the Pinstripe Bowl. So why would you take serious the result from the Military Bowl? Maybe not to that degree. Tulane wasn't starting quite the offense that I think Virginia Tech started in that Pinstripe Bowl, but it does dampen that victory a little bit in terms of takeaways and where you're going with the program. So can you beat a good team? Can you beat a good team on the road? You haven't done that. Can you beat? David Teal wrote about this when he was down there, checking off different boxes along the way. Can you beat a Power 5 conference team, non-conference team? They haven't done that since I think 2017.
Wow.
That West Virginia game?
Wow.
I think that's what the stat is. I'd have to if I
Was that FedEx?
butchered that, I apologize, Teal. But I think that's the last time they beat a Power 5
That sounds right.
non-conference opponent.
Sounds right.
And we're talking about 7 years now. That's been a long time. So there are things they need to do before I'm like, all right, they're truly back. They're true. That's why I put them in that dark horse category. And if I were ranking the teams, I do need to fill out my All-ACC ballot here. I'm putting Florida State, Clemson ahead of them. I'm putting, you want to talk about easy schedules, NC State ahead of them. I'm putting Louisville ahead of them. I'm probably putting Miami ahead of them. That's one I got to look at both because that's another team that you go, okay, I want to see it on the field before I start believing this. We believe the hype every year. But so that's where I have them. Sort of that not quite top tier of the ACC yet, but second tier and could work their way into that top tier.
Yeah, and I do think those I think you just mentioned 6 teams right there, and those are 6 teams that I think if they play to their ability, the ACC is going to be a better league this year, and we'll be able to say, man, the ACC was pretty good this year, and they actually flashed some depth because Virginia Tech was closer to being back than they ever have been. Maybe Miami plays better than they normally play.
They got a Heisman contending quarterback,
right? NC State continues to play consistent football year after year. So to piggyback off what he says, beat a good team, don't get pushed around in the trenches against the Florida States. NC State's, Louisville's of the world. So that, to me, is you return all 5 starters on the offensive line, plus you've got a little more depth. How much have they improved? They'll be better. When you return 5 starters and you know, a couple, 2 or 3 of the key guys you were playing were redshirt freshmen, and then you have improved depth on top of that, you're going to be better. But are they going to take a big enough step forward to go from just getting shellacked by Louisville in the trenches, destroyed, crushed, whatever word you want to throw out there? Can they go from that to beating Clemson in the trenches? Because Clemson has dropped off with their skill position talent because he won't hit the portal. They don't look like they've dropped off all that much in terms of like linebacker, defensive line.
They're going to reload on defense.
Yeah.
They lose a bunch on defense, but they've recruited fine on that side of the ball, and they keep humming there. I do wonder about their offense because they've got a lot of talented guys on offense. They just have not been able to put it together in recent years. So,
and so part of me, I can see the hype, and I do think it has a legitimate chance to materialize. But I'm also somewhat not pessimistic, but I'm a little bit conservative in my picks about how good I think. Like I would not pick them to beat Clemson right now, even at home, even though it's going to be a massive game or everything like that. But to go from just what was the final score of the Louisville game? 31-3, 35-3.
Something like that.
Yeah, they scored 3 points.
The scoring streak was extended.
It was.
I
barely.
can confirm that.
It was like field goal was right before halftime, wasn't it? Yeah. So, I mean, they just got crushed in the trenches in that game. So, they would have to improve by leaps and bounds to go from that performance to beating Clemson. Right?
34-3.
So, 34-3. So, that seems like a bridge too far from one year to the next.
Maybe. It was also their worst day.
It was.
You're judging them on their worst day versus some of their
was.
best days.
And now the other standpoint of it, and Jerome's kind of pretty much said this too, and I've been saying since the end of the season, if you go back knowing everything you know now, and you start last season with the offensive scheme that they kind of switched to, and with Drones as quarterback, you don't go 6-6 in the regular season. You go 8-4 most likely. And he was asked about that, and he straight up said that if they could go over and start it all over again, he didn't think the Purdue and Marshall games would be close. Like he thought Tech would win.
I don't think so either.
I agree with him 100%.
The Purdue game where they ran for 0 yards.
Right, exactly.
The Marshall game where they averaged 6 yards a carry.
Tootin had like 4 rushing yards against Purdue, which is crazy to think about. I think they would smoke those teams at the end of the season last year. And then we're sitting here saying, oh, this is an 8-4 team that brings everybody back, rather than a 6-6 team that brings.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think they'll probably get picked 5th or 6th today. Like you said, I think that's certainly possible. But if they were an 8-4 team bringing everybody back, I think they'd probably get picked 3rd.
Where do you have them? I was going to ask you guys at the end where you're going to vote them. You guys, obviously, as attending Media Day, you have a vote. Where you put them?
Well, this is the conference of quarterbacks. It's difficult. That was odd branding, I thought, at the ACC. Conference of quarterbacks. So they got some good quarterbacks. A lot of transfers to get to the conference of quarterbacks. But no, like I said, I probably have them 5th or 6th, somewhere. I have to look at it still before I turn it in, but somewhere in that range.
I would probably have them 5th.
And who's ahead of them?
Clemson and Florida State. Louisville. I mean, I would have to research Louisville.
I'm thinking
more.
I'm putting NC State ahead of them,
NC
too.
NC State's just been so consistent under Doran, and they consistently have really good defensive line play. Charlie Wiles is an outstanding coach. And I know they lost a great linebacker. To me, the bigger question about NC State is their quarterback. Grayson McCall was awesome at Coastal Carolina when, what's the coach's name who's at Liberty now? Chadwell. When Jamie Chadwell, he has a very unique offense. So their quarterback, Grayson McCall, was awesome at Coastal Carolina. As soon as Chadwell left, his numbers dropped off. Chadwell gets to Liberty, and Salter, who was very pedestrian the year before, all of a sudden puts up like All-American type numbers. I think his offense is fantastic for quarterbacks. So how good is Grayson McCall actually? Because that's a staff at NC State that showed last year that they didn't know exactly what to do with their quarterback situation until late in the season. So we'll see about NC State.
Well, look at this schedule that NC State had. They play Tennessee and Clemson in the first month.
That Tennessee games, I mean, that
This is the rest of the ACC schedule, though. Wake Forest, Syracuse, Cal, Stanford, Duke, Georgia Tech, North Carolina.
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
What scares you on that schedule?
Right.
That said, is there a team in the league that plays to its level of competition more than NC State? Like, if they upset Clemson, it would not shock me. Of
course.
And if they lost to Stanford, it would not shock me.
Well, didn't Duke beat them pretty handily last year?
Well, that's the thing
And then-
with
right.
NC State. They're all over the map.
Well, they just couldn't figure out their quarterback until
Right.
Remember they benched Brennan Armstrong, and then they figured out, well, maybe we should have just kept starting him and then just run the heck out of the ball.
Yeah.
And by the end of the year, they were playing really
I forget,
good football.
did MJ Morris, did he voluntarily choose to redshirt at the end?
So he could transfer.
So he
to
could
Maryland.
transfer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if he got hurt or if
Right.
he chose to do that. So yeah, that was sort of a mess, that whole
Yeah.
thing like that. But I've put my faith in NC State before, and then they let me down in terms of picks. So I don't feel like I can be confident to pick them at the top of the league.
Right.
But I think
8 or 9
they'll
wins
they'll be another very solid
Absolutely,
team
yeah.
this year.
I think Virginia Tech could be above NC State. I think the teams that finish in front of them, Florida State, Clemson, I think Miami is going to be. I know we always say like Miami
Drinking the Kool-Aid, Gio. That's what you're doing
but
over there.
Here's the one thing Miami.
What about North Carolina?
No, heck no. No faith in Mac Brown in that.
They got a heck of a running back down there.
A
They got
great running back, but-
an offensive
Wait, if
line.
Mac Brown couldn't get it done with Sam Howell,
I agree.
and who was the guy last year?
Drake
Drake May.
all bark, no bite.
I agree, but they have talent.
They always have
but they
talent.
always
I know.
I think the difference with Miami this time around, one, Mario Cristobal, a little. I can appreciate some of his accomplishments, and I think they got the right coach.
Can you?
I think so. But I think the biggest
can
thing is they
recruit.
have a Heisman contending quarterback. When's Miami had that in recent time?
Well,
I don't know. They were
he
hyping
hasn't
up
played
Tyler-
for Miami yet.
Yeah, they were hyping up Tyler Van Dyke last year.
Oh, he was
and
great as a
De'Aaron
freshman,
King
and then he
before
got
that.
worse. Every quarter.
I think Cam Ward's a different tier
De'Aaron
than
King
Tyler
and
Van
Brad
Dyke.
Kaya, and how many of these quarterbacks
Yeah.
have they had that we've heard all this stuff about that, and then it just never materializes for them? Like how many times do we have to be fooled by Miami before we're like, it's just not going to happen with them?
I hope they don't succeed. I do think that Virginia Tech Miami game is one of the biggest ACC
I hope they
games of
don't
the year.
succeed either, Gio.
What do you got, David?
I think I'd probably have Tech somewhere between. I'll probably have Tech somewhere between 5 and 7. I don't think Miami's a top 4 team, but maybe it's a one spot ahead of Tech. I don't know. I think they're very comparable. I think North Carolina's in that conversation, but probably below. NC State is really consistent. I think McCall will be fine. I mean, they still got Concepcion, which was interesting. Tangent. APR was asked who one of his favorite players to watch in the conference on offense is that's not on his team, or like if you could add a guy on offense from any team in the conference, who would you add to your team? And he said Concepcion from NC State. I mean, the kid was fantastic in Lane last year. I think Louisville should be pretty good again in year 2 under Brom. 5 to 7, I think, is fair, but to bring the conversation back around to Tech, like Andy talked about the checklist. I remember Will talking about it, writing one of Will's Monday Thoughts last year. He kind of wrote a similar thing about, hey, here are all the accomplishments, and Tech hasn't beaten a good team yet, and that's what it's going to come down to. I think, Gio, at the beginning of this conversation, you asked about what are people not talking about. I think the bottom line is you got to win games, right? The offseason hype and everything can manifest and whatnot, and we can talk about this as long as we want, but at the end of the day, Tech has to go to Nashville and prove it can win. And I don't worry about that game. I think the Rutgers game will be the first real opportunity to really judge, assuming nothing goes wrong in the first couple games, and it's not like anything's ever gone wrong in Norfolk before, right? I think that Rutgers game will really be a good test. We'll know whether Tech can battle in the trenches or not. I like this team, but I'm reserved and conservative in that I still have questions on the offensive line, some questions about safety. I think this team will be good, but at the same time, they have to prove still to some people that they can win big games, because yes, they won 5 of their last 7 games last year, but the teams they beat were not of that great caliber. But you guys brought up Vic and that schedule back then. It's not like this is the craziest schedule in the world. So there is reason for optimism, but there's also reason to be a little bit realistic and not as high on Tech.
I think when you look, we're talking about where you put them in the ACC. What's the great team in the ACC this year? I don't think you're going in, like, if it was the old system, I don't think you're talking about a playoff team necessarily from the ACC.
Agreed.
I think Florida State will probably be the pick. Florida State or Clemson. Clemson's finished in the teens the last couple of years. What is that offense?
Virginia Tech finished ahead of Clemson in the conference standings last year.
Yeah, Clemson was 4-4 last year.
Yeah.
I mean, they finished. Clemson's not been that top tier team, like national championship caliber, for the last 3 years. They finished ranked in the between 10 and 20 the last 3 years. Florida State lost a ton of talent from last year, and we kind of saw what they were when Jordan Travis went down, and now you have a new quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei, who, pretty good season at Oregon State last year, but floundered with Clemson a little bit. I mean, that's why he left after that 1 year. So is that a guarantee? I don't think you just have that, far and away best team in the conference, and I think that's why you bring in teams that 5, 6, 7 in the conference to go, hey, why not us? Why can't this team jump up there and do it?
And Louisville is actually my sleeper pick to be maybe the best team in the conference. I'm not saying I would pick them first, but I would actually probably favor them maybe a little bit more than Virginia Tech to be the sleeper team per se, because I think they showed last year that they were better in the trenches, I think. Now, if Tech takes a step forward in the trenches, then maybe it's a different conversation. But the fact of the matter is these conferences are so big these days and the schedules are unbalanced. We could get to the end of the season and still don't know necessarily who the best team is. And that's been that way for a while. Go back to the last time Tech played for the ACC title. They won the Coastal Division in 2016 and played Clemson. Virginia Tech only had the 3rd best record in the ACC that year. They went 6-2. Louisville and Clemson both went 7-1. But Louisville didn't get to make the title game because they had lost the tiebreaker, to Clemson from the Atlantic Division. But that was the case where, the Atlantic was the better division, but Virginia Tech won the Coastal Division. So you didn't even necessarily get it turned out to be a great game. And I'm not saying Virginia Tech wasn't deserving, but if I'm Louisville, I'm a little bit ticked off that the division setup was the way it was.
We talk about some of these middle of the pack teams are pretty interesting too, like Georgia Tech.
Yeah,
King's good.
They've got a really tough schedule. I think that's why nobody's picking them to be high, but I think that's a really tough team. SMU. Yeah, I know they got to bulk up the lines. I think that was a big thing when moving up to a Power 5 conference like this. But that's an interesting team that can put up some points. So I mean, it's that middle class of the ACC this year, I think, is very interesting. Relative to everybody else.
Like I said, I think it's going to be a deeper league this year. And one more brief comment on NCAA football. I was watching some of the players play, and one of them was picking Georgia Tech, and I saw the Georgia Tech team ratings on there, and it's like their offensive rating is only like an 80, and I'm like, you've got a guy at quarterback and a running back who could both rush for 1,000 yards. Their offense is, I think, a little bit underrated, and I think Brent Key's
don't sleep on them in Dublin.
Well, that's what
Florida State could be an interesting one.
Lines just came out. 13-point favorites for the Seminoles. I think Georgia Tech could cover that in there. Yeah,
well,
I like
especially
that.
First games of the season are so weird.
Yeah.
I remember when Northwestern beat Nebraska up there and had no. I think it was the only game they won in the Big Ten all season.
Yeah.
You just get these weird, especially you're talking about a week 0 game across the ocean, different time zone, different culture that you're playing in over there. I mean, it's just weird results could happen out of that.
Remember when Virginia Tech smoked Florida State in the opening game of the season, and everybody was like, "Oh, it's going to be a great year for Virginia Tech," right? Yeah,
I think
a lot of those early season games, you just never know how it's going to turn out after that.
Yeah, I think the difference there for the Noles is they were unproven with Willie Taggart, and now they kind of got a a serious program going with
Yeah,
Mike
for
Norvell.
sure. Yeah.
But definitely a good point there. Well, to kind of flip things to the what's happening now, fall camp is about to get underway for Virginia Tech football. What does a successful camp look like for this team? What did the players or the coach have to say about it? But in your guys' eyes, I think the biggest thing is just get out of there healthy.
Yeah, it's always health. That's the big thing. I think it's reintegrating somebody like Ollie Jennings back into the offense. I mean, they kind of found a rhythm last year with the guys that they had, and now Jennings is back as an alpha receiver in that room, and the guy that they were expected to be the number one guy last year. How does he come back into that group and play into the offense? Is it going to be more pass-based than the past? I mean, the running game really came on strong last year. Will they throw it more because they have the strength in the receivers that they have? And then, defensively, I think it's sorting out some of those positions. What's the linebacker rotation? What's the safety rotation? Who's going to be the top guys there? I mean, that's pretty important stuff in the heart of your defense, the center of that defense. Just some of the questions that would need to be answered.
For me, safety. Like, how does the safety spot shake out? Who's the second starter? How does the depth come along? Now, the thing is, we're not going to be able to answer those questions until the Hokies start playing games.
Yeah.
I hope it's a boring preseason, and I think it will be a boring preseason for most people unless there are injuries that get announced, like major injuries. But it's one of those things.
Well, I think they would prefer a boring.
I agreed. I would prefer one.
If it's like full of fireworks and stuff, that's probably not a good thing.
Especially when you got everybody coming back and you know what you've got at 90% of your starting positions. You want to develop depth and everything like that. But if you have unexpected things happening this preseason, then that's probably a bad thing. So it's not one of those years where it's like, oh, the preseason starting, hold on to your seat, right? I don't think a lot is going to happen, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, think about last year at the position, like just the conversation entering the season was the quarterback battle. And there's no quarterback battle this year. There frankly aren't. There are very few position battle discussions, and that is going to be super interesting because it might be a super boring, quiet preseason, but in a lot of ways, that's not a bad thing. And that's kind of what I wrote about in the article Gio referenced earlier. Tech has this approach. Tech's in the conversation now. Tech's going to be in the conversation to as a dark horse. Chris, you mentioned it. I brought it up. I brought it up at one point yesterday, and you mentioned it in your article. Like BetMGM. Of BetMGM's ACC future bets, 41% are on Tech. Like, Tech is a realistic dark horse option, and at the bottom line is get through fall camp healthy. Go play games, go win games, and go prove and go beat good teams. And, if Tech can, beat Rutgers and a team in the trenches, like I think that will, and that's almost 2 months away at this point, but that will be a good identification as to how good this team I think can really be this year.
Yeah, and I think I'll expand on this point a little bit next week in a column when practice starts. But I think it's very important. It's not so important for the Georgias and the Alabamas because their window is every year, but not every program has that advantage. Like this year's to me seems like it's a window opportunity for Virginia Tech. So you need to take advantage of it this year because they will lose a lot of seniors after this year. And I'm not saying the program's going to drop off and they're going to be bad or anything like that, but you can't predict the future, especially these days with conference realignment. But I know they have a window this year where they do have an opportunity to be very good. And you're looking back and with benefit of hindsight, the 1999 season was a window where it was a senior-laden team with a great quarterback, and they took advantage of that window. Unfortunately, I wish it had lined up a little bit and they could have played for that 99 team had been there in 98 or 2000 because I think that 99 team would have won the national title in either one of those seasons. They just happened to play one of the best teams in the history of college football in that particular Florida State team. On the other hand, you fast forward 6 years, I think that 2005 team is the most talented team in Virginia Tech history from scholarship number 1 to scholarship number 85. They did not take advantage of their window. They choked kind of in the two huge games that they played. Specifically at the quarterback position, really. This is a window season for Virginia Tech, and I'm not saying that like I have a playoff expectation. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but I think the opportunity, the window is there to go out there and win 9 or 10 games and advance the program and show that everything's heading in the right direction and improve recruiting and things like that. So I think it's very important to take advantage of the window that's in front of you.
When was the last time that the hype was this big? Was it all the way back in 2012? There was a little bit of this in 2016, but then kind of everybody left and didn't end up coming back. Didn't end up using that last year eligibility that they had. Now NIL and everything changes that a little bit. Or 2020, but then COVID kind of kiboshed that, and then never saw what that team could have been. Like, when's the last time the hype was this big around this program?
Like 2016. I think with, new coach, refreshed attitude around the program, bringing in Gerard Evans, where it's like, all right, you got this, major JUCO commit to come in to play quarterback in this offense that's, going to take over at Virginia Tech. That was the promise back then. And then, in that first year, they delivered, winning 10 games like that, getting to the ACC championship game again. I think that was the last time they kind of felt like, this program was trending back into the direction of where it was in the past.
I would say, for me, I would actually go 2018 because they were coming off 2 years in a row where they finished in the top 25, a 10-win season, a 9-win season. You had lost some very good players off 2017, but you were also sitting there, okay, more Fuentes players are in the program. They started off ranked in the top 25 still.
They did. But if you heard the off-season comments that Fuente was making about that team, he was trying to tell people.
I know.
He was trying to, like, I remember talking to him in the off-season. It's like, what are your expectations? Like, we have a leadership thing that we need to figure out.
Right.
And that was his way of saying, like, we're not very good on defense. There's a talent void in this program.
And his comments about lack of leadership, well, we saw that later in the season when all that stuff went down.
Well, we saw that pretty early in the season.
We saw it pretty early in the season too. Yeah. But as far as how the fans viewed it, you're a top 25 team. You're coming off your two best back-to-back seasons in 7 or 8 years, and you're playing a high-profile Monday night game at Florida State. I think there was a lot of hype there. In hindsight, it shouldn't have been. But just from how people viewed things, I think people thought the program was at that point where it was about to be back. And you go out there and they smoked Florida State in that game. And you're like, okay, we're coming off a 10-win season, a 9-win season.
Redshirt sophomore quarterback is in charge of the long-term starter.
Exactly. He's going to be a 4-year starter. Right. And things are looking up, and we're back. And not so much.
Fair enough.
Yep.
All right. Well, the hype is real. We're excited about it. Just a couple of injury note things. Gosnell seems to be good to go. Only question mark remains is Tucker Holloway. I think Tootin, Jay Lane, and maybe even some others. Like, I think of a guy like Xavier Turner Bradshaw, who's really fast to fill that void if needed. Other than that, Hokies are healthy, which is a big plus. Got to stay that way through camp.
That's Holloway's a big question mark, and we'll see if he can go. It does help to have Jalen Lane, that punt return capacity. I think Jay Lane was like top 5 in the country a couple years ago at Middle Tennessee.
He was.
It's nice to just have that as a reserve option coming in.
He returned one for a touchdown last year that got called back.
It did. It was a pretty blatant block in the back. I think they have people that can replace him in there. And not that you say you want to play without him, but if you have to move forward without them, they do have options there.
Awesome. Well, as always, today's show brought to you by First Bank and Trust Company as our presenting sponsor. First Bank and Trust Company's support has been invaluable to TSL, helping us to bring you all the great content across all of our platforms. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Bank with First Bank and Trust Company. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. All right, fellas, before we let everybody go, what's coming up this week editorial content-wise?
I'll have my normal Q&A. I know these guys or somebody's working on an APR article, and
David spoke to APR at the kickoff. I talked with Dorian Strong quite a bit, so we'll have stories on those two guys coming out. And all ACC ballots due by Sunday. That'll be out next week in terms of the ACC picks. And then, they report for practice on Tuesday, I think.
The 31st. I think the 31st is the first day of practice, and they report back on the 30th, which is
30th
Tuesday.
is a Tuesday,
Yeah.
first practice, and then I think we have our first availability Friday.
So we'll be doing another podcast next week. We don't know what day yet, but we will be talking about practice opening.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. We got a lot of fun stuff we're going to do on the podcast this year. Some new segments, some attachments to the podcast. They're going to be shorter videos that you can check out as well on YouTube. Nick is doing a great job with the social medias on TikTok and stuff. So we're kind of all hands on deck, ready to dive headfirst into football season, and we can't wait to bring it to you. Well, that brings episode 364 of the Tech Sideline podcast to a close. For Nick Brown, for David Cunningham, Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long, and we'll see you next week. Football season is here.